I suffered a chainsaw cut when I was 20. Kickback. I won't go into the exact scenario, but a big part of it was due to the fact that I was quite ignorant and I suppose self-centered at the time. Never considered that this would ever happen to me, even though I'd fallen out of trees previous to that. I just carried on, got up, carried on like it never happened the next day. But the kickback injury was a bit more serious. Needed 36 stitches. It's obviously not in a visible place, but it was quite near an artery, and obviously had it not been for nothing other than luck, I could have died, and I was only 20. But like I said, back at the time I felt like I was invincible and it would always happen to somebody else. Never considered the effect it would have on my family. Let's say if I was fatally wounded, or my boss at the time, Mark, probably would have ruined his business that he'd worked so hard for. My colleagues who would have had to deal with that situation. Yeah, it was a close call, but it just went completely over my head at the time. But that was then, and this is now. Nowadays I constantly remind myself, I make a point of running through scenarios in my mind, the worst case scenarios. I imagine how it would be for my daughter and wife hearing the news. I remind myself of that every day, not just chainsaw, but obviously climbing as well and doing the dangerous job that it is. But in particular here we're talking about kickback injuries. It's a very grim thought, and sadly it's happened to a few people. I think there was 2 in the UK. I think it was last year or the year before, who suffered fatal kickback injuries. And we often sort of blow these things off because it's easier. We don't think about them. But I do think about them a lot, and I put myself in that predicament. Here's a 200T, and I look at it and I imagine the damage that this had caused to my head in particular. I envisage if the chain was running, I got a kickback, it could strike my eye, not only tear my eye out, but then run down my face as the chain spins and perhaps tear into my jugular vein. I think about that. I remind myself of that. So there's obviously measures you can take to help protect yourself against chainsaw kickback. This is aimed at climbers, obviously. Choose the appropriate tool for the job. Don't overlook using a handsaw. You don't have to use it all the times, but there may be certain cuts where the risk of using a chainsaw seems unacceptable. Don't neglect your handsaw. You should always carry one. consider how you use the saw in a tree if you're using a chainsaw. Where it's aligned, always keep it to one side. So if it does get thrown in your direction, you're not going to get struck. It's a really simple thing, but so often you see people looking directly at the bar within striking distance of their face. It's unbelievable, the people that do that. Consider from a defensive point of view using two hands on the saw. This doesn't stop you getting kickback, but it gives you a better chance of avoiding the saw hitting you because you have your hand on that top handle. To some extent you may be able to hold it back, depending. Think about where the tip of your bar is. Try to avoid using the tip of your bar. Try to use the bigger part of your bar. This is not where the kickback is produced. It's this very top bit here. One of the dangers of working in conifers here in the region that I operate is that they're often very congested canopies. So you may be sawing through one branch, but the tip is perilously close to other limbs. There's always that risk of it getting thrown out because it touches off another branch there. There's lots of things and ways to prevent it from happening from a practical point of view. There are just a few. But I think the best, or what I've found to be the best way of avoiding accidents, is just being self-aware, of having some kind of ritual that keeps absent-mindedness at bay and gives you some perspective. A perspective that is able to banish distraction, pressure, time constraints, everything else, and just puts things in perspective logically, what's important here. I have a picture of my daughter in my wallet. Lots of people do for different reasons. But one of the greatest incentives for me for having that picture is that it reminds me of my responsibility to her. It makes me think about the pain she'd go through to hear that her dad was killed by whatever. In this instance, we're talking about chainsaw kickback. So I look at that picture kind of at least 3-4 times a day. If I'm down, if I'm at the start of the day, if I get down for a break from the tree, I look at the picture. It's not that I miss her or anything. I look at the picture to remind me. I look at her face, and it reminds me of the responsibility that I have to her. Because concentration doesn't automatically just happen. It doesn't, like, you may think you're concentrating, you may think you're focused, but are you really? Or are you thinking about something else? How much is your mind on the job? Now, we know the people who were fatally killed by chainsaw injuries, and other accidents too. There's accidents that have happened here in Victoria that get buried, by the companies or corporations, whoever. Probably they're embarrassed about it. So we don't learn anything. We don't learn where that person's mind was. We know he made a mistake, and we all feel bad about it. But, and nobody's blaming or finger wagging. But we'd love to know where their mind was. That's how you learn something. So my advice is to is to practice concentrating. If you suffer from boredom and absent-mindedness, no matter how good or competent you think you are, no matter how experienced, it happens to experienced people too. So if you're working and you find yourself dreaming about being elsewhere, if you're one of these people that listen to podcasts when you're working or whatever, just have a think about that. Just think about, if you get hurt, all right, who's it going to affect? Think about the people who are left behind, who have to pick up the pieces. Think about the colleague trying to shove his finger in your jugular vein to stop you from bleeding, or patching pieces of your face back together. Think about that. It's grim, but you have to think about these things. It may save your life or save somebody else's life. Anyway, time's getting on. I'm going to cut this short now. So take responsibility. Don't wait to be told. Don't wait till your association sends you an advisory or send you some statistics. Take responsibility now. It's we can't always foresee every single occurrence or mishap in the future. You may go down to the shop tonight and get hit by a bus and die, but we've got to take reasonable measures to protect ourselves. At least we owe it to the people around us. Even if you don't think about yourself that much, think about them. Let that be a big part of your motivation to be more careful and conscientious and self-aware at work. And a big part of that is concentration. And if you struggle with concentration, then there are techniques you can learn to get your mind where it should be. Just do a little bit of research. There's lots of information out there. Okay, thanks for watching.